Here are Ben and Dan, two self-proclaimed internet critics at a breakfast bar near the edge of the known universe. They're about to engage in a conversation they believe to be unique and entertaining, a conversation they hope to share with the likes of you. But what these two men rapidly entering middle age fail to understand is that their conversation exists in the deepest abscess of the internet, next to 1,000 other YouTube critics just like them. Sentenced to the eternal hellfire of mediocrity, these two-bit amateurs have yet to fully realize they are destined for merely dozens of views, mostly from their parents, and they will never fully escape this place that they will come to know as the Twilight Zone. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Ben.
We're here today to talk about Season 5, Episode 25 of The Twilight Zone, titled The Masks. Considered by a lot to be one of the finest episodes of the series.
Absolutely.
One of your favorites. You selected this episode. It was directed by Ida Lupino, who is the only female to direct an episode of The Twilight Zone, as well as...
Star in an episode, different episode.
Yes, yeah. Which episode did she star in?
She's in 16mm Shrine, which is Season 1 episode. It's a classic. You got washed up movie star reliving her youth, on film.
I've watched The Twilight Zone since I was a little kid. My dad introduced it to me. I think the first episode I saw was Time Enough at Last, where the protagonist is in, well, we're not here to talk about that.
Getting sidetracked already.
I am getting sidetracked already. So I think we'll just start at the top of the episode. You have the classic Twilight Zone opening narration by Rod Serling, which...
The place is New Orleans. The time is 1964.
But the opening narration works, I think, because... Well, it works because it's Rod Serling delivering it, right? And he always sort of broke the fourth wall a little bit in the show because the camera would cut to him in a different part of the room and then show him. And so it worked on that level, but also his delivery and his presence always made it an effective way to communicate detail in the story, right?
Yeah, he really transcends kind of the rules of the world. He's kind of like the gatekeeper into whatever peak we're getting into the Twilight Zone. Like he's almost our guide, and he's.
But it's an effective way to set up the story, especially for shows like the Twilight Zone, where it's sort of anthologized. You have to do a lot of information dumping right away. Right. So you have the opening narration where we have Jason Foster, played by Robert Keith, who was born in 1898, I believe. And he is the father of actor Brian Keith.
Who is Brian Keith?
An actor. And so anyways, we have Jason Foster, who has services to perform, debts to pay, and just some justice to mete out. And the interesting part of the intro is the sort of justice to mete out line to me. Because that's, I think, a big question that I asked during that whole episode is, why are these characters going through this? Why is he subjecting them to this, right? And so Jason Foster is a dying man who is on his deathbed. His doctor says he has moments left. He doesn't know how many. And that his daughter and her family are arriving soon, right? As Mardi Gras is happening, like you said, in New Orleans. So Emily Harper arrives, played by Virginia Gregg. She arrives with her husband Wilfred, played by Milton Selzer.
Your favorite actor.
Yeah, he sucks. Brooke Hayward as Paula, right?
Yeah. Young Paula, who walks with beauty in the night.
And Alton Sues as Wilfred Jr., who is a good character. So Jason is immediately sarcastic upon their arrival. And I love, Rod Serling had a really good way of delivering, I think, nuanced sarcasm through dialogue. and it's really sharp and really well done.
Sharp and witty.
There's Wilfred Jr., looking as aware as ever. You know, Wilfred, I think the only book you ever read was a ledger.
We meet this family. They enter in. They're first greeted by Jeffrey the butler, and we get an immediate sense of their personality a little bit. In the background, you kind of see them just shoveling all of their shit kind of dismissively onto him.
Here, take this, Jeffrey.
And these too, Jeffrey.
Yes, sir.
The doctor comes out. He's kind of expressing, his concern in the state of their father. Emily starts going on about her own ailments, her own maladies, these chills that she's been having. And the doctor's like, I'm trying to tell you, your dad is dying. So we get a pretty quick, good sense of just kind of
Who these characters are.
Yeah.
Well, there's the last line where Wilfred asks the doctor, is he dying? What's happening? And the doctor says, yes, he's dying. And there's a brief grin on Wilfred's face as the scene transitions, right? So you know that this family is here for nefarious reasons, and it's pretty easy to figure out why they're here to get everything that they inherit when he passes. And so his sarcasm, I think, is a bit more understood as that progresses, right? Especially because you have the contrast with Mardi Gras, this big celebration at the start. They say this is a Mardi Gras like we've never seen before. And you have the daughter Paula and Emily in some ways, and Wilfred Jr. They all want to go out and enjoy Mardi Gras. They don't actually even want to be there with Jason, right?
Yeah, especially at least the parents. Yeah, they just don't want to be anywhere around him. Especially Emily. You can tell you can tell she's frightened of the digs that her father might throw at her. Just you can tell there's a little bit of a history there, but she's bearing up. She's putting on her brave face.
She is, in a way. Quotes Shakespeare at one point.
Well, I love that. I feel like that gives a little more depth to her character a little bit. He jests at scars who never felt a wound when her dad is kind of giving her a little dig. At the same time, he's just pointing out that she's always has this tendency to, play up the melodrama of all of her anxieties and hypochondria and fears. He's literally dying. And she throws this at him, which gives you maybe a little insight to what she maybe feels internally, that she really sees herself as this person who suffers more so than others, or that, others really don't understand the depths to which she feels this pain. I don't know, it's just a very quick line thrown in, little Shakespeare quote, but I feel like it added a lot more depth to her character.
Oh, I think it really did. And it draws into question the dynamic between him and her, right? Because another question that I had, you're kind of seeing this from Jason as the protagonist of the story, right? A dying man. His family's here to take everything he has. And that certainly is the case, but there are layers to their story, kind of by what you're talking about, and also by the just the sarcasm that he's doling out when they're there, right? And to her family, Wilfred Jr., aware as always. That's just a very cutting line.
So great.
That's sort of bless his heart sort of line. And so you've got this dynamic between the two, and it ends up something horrible happens to her and her family at the end, which spoilers. We'll get into that if you haven't seen
it
this.
already.
Yes, yeah. I love that dynamic between them too. When you really think about it, you don't know quite where this started. Is she this way because of her father, who always treated her this way, or is he treating her this way because she has acted differently? It's a question that's not answered at all in the story.
Although I do feel we do get more sense. He's drawn them all into the living room or the parlor room or whatever it would have been called at the time. And as he's getting wheeled down, he overhears Paula complaining about how dull it is and how, sitting around waiting for this old man to die. And you can tell it kind of hurts him in the moment, but it does. I guess it does give you insight to maybe what Emily has been like as a mother to her own children, and maybe the reflection of Emily's self-centeredness, Wilfred's self-centeredness, and how it's kind of developed into the way their children have come up.
Right. Wilfred Jr. tortures small animals.
Oh, perhaps not the same degree of excitement that you get from torturing small animals as I've seen you do in the past.
Lay off, grandfather.
Gets pleasure out of torturing small animals.
Yeah.
The same way that someone might get pleasure out of a kiss or an embrace.
So he serves them dinner, and you get to the whole point of the episode, the masks.
And I've arranged for all of us to wear masks.
What? Masks?
How droll, Father. Masks, I swear.
They unveil the masks. Look rather comical, but the amazing thing about the Twilight Zone is how low budget it is a lot of the time. I mean, obviously it's shot in the late 50s and early 60s, but it relies completely on the writing, right? And so while these masks don't look necessarily that terrifying, the way that Rod Serling has written this story, the characters, the reputation that this show has, right? The tone that it's set, you know instantly that these masks are not good news. They're going to go on these people's faces. And then he says he got them from...
They are made by an old Cajun.
The thing that I love too about the masks, because the family really just wants him to die. They don't want to humor him at all. He's in his last moments, right? And maybe that is revealing also in their sort of backstory. Why don't they even want to be around him when he is in his last moments, right? More questions that are unanswered.
In our upcoming segment.
And the thing that I love, though, about him asking them to wear the masks, Wilfred Jr. and Paula don't want to. Neither do Emily or her Wilfred, right? And the only way that he gets them to wear the masks is by stating,
You all came here for one purpose, to watch me go and cry bon voyage. To put coins on my closed eyes and with your free hands start grabbing things from my shelves. Well, I shall not disappoint you. Everything is yours. Everything is prepared, the will is made, the four of you inherit everything I own. But I must include this addenda, this small proviso. You shall wear your masks until midnight.
And then immediately Wilfred has a turn, and he's like, well, we don't want to be spoil sports.
This is your pleasure, Father. We'll indulge you.
And he's very overacted, 1960s, typical...
But the character, he, the second that this is on the table, he jumps onto it, and he is going to be the one to make sure that the rest of his family stays in line with, don't fuck this up. Like, oh my God, this is what we've all been waiting for so long.
Right, right. And I at the end of the episode, I do like the moment where about 5 minutes before midnight, because that's when they have to have the unmasking is at midnight. 5 minutes before, so they only have 5 minutes to go. And I can't remember if it's Paula or Wilfred Jr. I think it's Paula who says, I can't stand this anymore.
I can't stand this thing on my face another minute. I'm gonna take it off. I don't care.
Stop it. You stop it.
And so even with everything on the line, even with him on his deathbed, she can't stand to have this discomfort for 5 more minutes, which is another interesting statement, I think, on her character and on the whole family. There are only 5 minutes until midnight, and even Wilfred saying, this is unreasonable. This is, becoming quite unbearable. It's a dying man's wish.
I know. I kind of wonder about this, because they say this, and Jason kind of asks them, have you all said everything you want to say to me? Is there anything else you want to say to me? Is there anything else? And it almost like he's kind of giving him a chance, like because I mean, to step back a minute, he's doling out the masks, and he starts by asking Wilfred to describe himself, like in a few words, like his personality. He describes himself as very affable. And, Jason, through his wit, he kind of turns this around, and he's calling them the opposite of what they truly are, in a way that he's really just calling them what they are. And he's giving them kind of a personified image of their personalities to wear. And it almost seems like, maybe a couple of hours of looking at their true identities from the inside externally might even be enough to give them some insight into some of their flaws as people. And it almost seems like 5 minutes till midnight, he's asking them, have you learned anything in just these hours? Like, has this done anything for you? This is just kind of your last chance.
Is there nothing else you have to say to me?
Only that I'm feeling buried alive.
And and maybe that's part of why they had become so uncomfortable. I mean, I'm sure it's, awful wearing like a mask for that long, as we've learned.
So we all know now.
But I wonder if it's almost partially implied that it's so unbearable to look at maybe their true identities that they can't bear it any longer. Because how do you continue to exist, in such a flawed manner without ignoring, largely these kind of aspects of your character?
Yeah, it's a great episode.
Yeah.
It's the Twilight Zone in and of itself is something that I think can't be replicated. There have been 3 remakes?
Yeah.
Two remakes. Obviously the 2019 remake with Jordan Peele as showrunner, which you liked.
Very controversial. I watched it in maybe a different lens. I feel like a lot of people were really did not like it. I kind of watched it as just a bit of an homage, knowing Jordan Peele is like a really big fan of the original series. And, in each of the episodes, you have these little nods to just kind of classic episodes that they're kind of doing an homage to, in a sense. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of how you look at it. I can understand why a lot of people didn't like it, but I think there were definitely things to take away from the new series, the reboot that I liked.
Gotcha. Yeah, the first series I think can't quite be replicated the way that
absolutely not.
It comes across. Not for a lack of trying by a lot of people, right? We get to the big unmasking moment. Classic Twilight Zone, right? Classic horror element. They unmask themselves and they all look like the characteristics of the masks that they've worn, which are indeed characteristics that they've embodied. And they're going to remain that way for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
F***ing horrifying. Classic Rod Serling. He had a fascination with death. We've talked about this before. He witnessed multiple people die in the war, and also he witnessed a freak accident where someone was giving a speech, I think at a base or something when he was in the Army. He witnessed somebody get crushed by a pillar, something fell on them, and they died in a freak accident. And you can, I think, definitely feel the influence of those events on the stories of the Twilight Zone. The random acts of horror, the brutal irony that these characters find themselves in, right? Interestingly enough, I didn't know quite what to think about him not having a different face when his death mask came off. I wasn't expecting anything different because I'm like, I don't think they would just make him as have a skeleton face, right? And so I didn't. I was like, I think it's just going to be his face, and then it was, and I was like, well, okay.
Well, then the doctor kind of gives his commentary on it. He's like, oh, so this is the face of death.
This must be death. No horror, no fear. Nothing but peace.
Yeah.
Just
at peace.
Peace, calm, no fear. No
horror.
Yeah, and maybe in that, if there's nothing left in him, that's all that there's left to express. I don't know. Yeah, that is interesting.
He also dies, though, in a very 1960s
Oh my God.
way. I think we synced that up pretty good.
Nice.
Yeah. Do you have any notes that you wanted to take a look at?
Yes, I do. Where are those notes? But so on a broader scale for this episode, obviously we've got a cast of 9 people, I think, in total, maybe less. Some characters without, even a credit on the IMDb. But this episode just has some of my absolute favorite lines. Like when Jason is first talking to Emily, he throws this line, "You've been to death's door so many times, it's a wonder you haven't worn a hole in the mat." Like, not only is that just like a killer line, but it also tells us that, Emily has a history of this kind of behavior and a bit of a hypochondriac, always thinks she's gravely ill. And it's just kind of like one of many lines that does a lot of work. It's like really well written. And this is just kind of the constant theme to this episode. Every line of dialogue, I feel like, is absolutely necessary and absolutely does a lot of work. Like, it's...
Oh, it's dialogue on steroids. Because dialogue is always supposed to work on multiple levels, and it's supposed to be hyper efficient, right? And you were talking about how it's beautifully written dialogue.
Obviously the dialogue in the whole episode is sort of elevated, but it's really acting as sort of a parable, as like a mythological kind of tale. And back to the setup by Rod Serling, like, he does this excellent job of laying the rules for this world, and everyone's abiding by the same rules in it, and it just kind of allows a space for just
anything to unfold, and these explorations of moral questions, right? Of like you were saying, the parable, the moral story. Obviously, this one's very anti-greed, anti-hedonistic lifestyle.
avarice.
Yes, avarice. And so the dialogue, kind of going back to that for a second, I think one thing that I love about dialogue like this, and dialogue like some of the original series, Star Trek, some of the older media, is that it's not necessarily made to sound like everyday person speak, which makes newer shows that try to do that in excess sound kind of sloppy, I think, and lazy and not inspiring.
There's sort of a reason. I mean, even shows that are supposed to more closely mimic real life and natural life, it's really never written the way that people actually talk, because no one wants to listen to that, because that's terrible. Like, if you're going to take the time to write something out, I mean...
Make the language sound beautiful.
Well, that's the point, because what most of us are kind of just coming up with off the cusp is not anything really usually that
worth exploring.
Commemorating.
It's more of that Rod Serling dialogue writing. He's a great writer. He wrote 90-some episodes of The Twilight Zone out of 153 episodes.
5 seasons.
Yeah. It's damn impressive. So I think that brings us, though, now to our new segment. We have questions.
Jeffrey, the butler, brings Jason a glass of milk. And we see Jason take a sip of this milk, but he doesn't drink the whole glass. What happened to the rest of that?
This has been We Have Questions with Ben and Dan. What episode do you think we should do next?
Of anything, or Twilight Zone, or what?
Twilight Zone.
It's a good question.
What episode do you think we should do next?
What do you guys think? Is there anything else you wanted to say?
I can't think of anything. We've talked about Rod Serling.
Oh, we forgot to make a notable mention. The makeup for this episode was done by William Tuttle.
That's all I have to say about this episode. Is there anything else?
Really good. It was really good. I liked it a lot.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
You know, it really feels like we're living in the Twilight Zone these days, doesn't it?
It does more and more every day.
Do you think we'll get more viewers on this video?
Maybe.
Maybe. I think we will.
I hope so.
Any day now, we're gonna get like 5 million views.
I think we're right around the corner from at least 200,000.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Any day now.
Yeah, any day now.
Any day now.